All right, welcome to the Jim Acosta Show. Thanks everybody for tuning in. My guest for this edition is Andy Parker. His daughter was killed in a shooting just 10 years ago this week, and ever since then, Andy has been on a crusade not just to have more gun safety in the United States, but also to regulate and better protect families when it comes to what is posted online. It's something that Andy's been battling ever since his daughter Allison was killed 10 years ago. Andy, great to see you. Thanks for doing this as always.
Great to
I
see
was
you.
just reading your just terrific Substack column on what it's been like all these 10 years and what you're going through this week now that it's been 10 years since Allison's passing. Tell us about that. And I guess, I mean, we're seeing the headlines coming out of Minneapolis, school just starting across much of the country. And already, of course, there's another mass shooting, this time in Minneapolis. Your thoughts?
Well, it's just another day in America. It's insane. This shouldn't be happening. Kids should be able to go to church, go to school without fear of being killed. And unfortunately, you have a block. I guess you can call them Republicans now, but well, what used to be Republicans, they're all MAGAs, and they're just not. They worship. They feel like that kids and families and anybody that's devastated by gun violence is just collateral damage as long as they can cling to their AR-15s. And what I've been proposing all these years is it's like, no, we're not going to get rid of the Second Amendment, but it's there's common sense that needs to take hold, and weapons of war don't belong in the street. We need to be able to do better background checks, red flag laws. I mean, there are things that we can do on a national level that we've done in Virginia. The AR-15 or the assault weapon ban is coming up in the General Assembly probably next January. But there are things that we can do to protect people, and we just haven't done enough. And along with that, Jim, there is that confluence, as you mentioned, of I call it guns and Google. There's a connection there between gun violence in this country and like this kid that killed these people in Minneapolis. I mean, he's posting online, he's posting these manifestos. Allison's killer posted and uploaded the video to Twitter at the time. So
Right.
there is this terrible symbiotic relationship between what's going on with social media and guns. And we have to bring it to we have to stop it, for crying out loud.
Yeah, and Andy, I mean, to me, the bottom line is, and listen, in this new job that I have, I can say what I want to say and tell it like it is. To me,
Yeah.
the reason why we're in this boat, and I know you agree with this, is just absolute cowardice. Cowardice in the Republican Party up on Capitol Hill, and even some Democrats, I think, fall into this category too. They are just totally panic stricken when it comes to the NRA and the gun lobby's power when it comes to elections. And it has paralyzed efforts to really seriously get at this problem, it seems to me. And yes, the online issue is potent, and we should talk about this too. But we can't get background checks in this country. It's just it all goes back to courage, and they just don't have it.
They don't. I remember. I think Tim Kaine told me that had when Gabby Giffords was shot, and she was a member of Congress, for crying out loud. And so when she was shot, he said if there had been a vote to implement some kind of gun restrictions at that point in time, if they'd done it, if it had been a vote that was in, that what do you call it, an undisclosed vote or an anonymous vote,
secret vote, something like that. Yeah,
it would have passed like 98-2. But
yes.
when the vote's out there, they to illustrate your point, it is cowardice. I think, Jim, I think they're afraid more of their base as much as they are the gun lobby. They're getting, but they're not getting as much money from the gun lobby as they used to. But I think they're just afraid of their base. I think they're afraid of their base, not just about guns, but just about any other issue in general.
No, and that's true. Anything under the sun.
Yeah,
And what's remarkable, Andy, is you're right. I think Allison and her murder, which, as you said, the killer put up online. It certainly appears to be one of the first episodes where a shooter like this was trying to glorify his actions online, and we have seen that take place time and again. In this Minneapolis case,
yeah,
the shooter appears to be referring back to previous mass shootings, and I don't. How do we stop this? Is there, because I know you've been fighting the good fight in terms of trying to bring some kind of regulation to these internet companies that just and these social media companies that just don't want to change.
yeah.
Is there a way to combat that?
Yeah, but again, it takes courage, and it's
Yeah.
the simple fix is you got to either revoke or amend Section 230, and that is the provision. Back in '96 when no one knew anything about their uh, Twitter or any kind of social media. It wasn't even a thought back then.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was let's protect these platforms so that they can foster free speech. Well, that was great until Facebook came along and Instagram and Twitter. And so now what you have is that provision that protects these companies from any kind of liability that needs to change. And I think that once if it does become if families can litigate and can sue these companies, that's going to stop it. I've said that for years. Is the minute you have all these uh, death by a thousand cuts, when these companies are faced with lawsuits, they'll start policing their platforms. They'll start
Mm.
being editors. They'll and have some oversight. I think you may have noticed, or we talked about this a while back during the when the Supreme Court um, kicked out the Gonzalez versus Google suit.
Yep.
They said, "Well, no, this is not our bailiwick. This needs to go back to Congress." Uh, Zuckerberg just eliminated all of his fact checkers or his content moderators, and
Yeah.
and so that's what you have. He's now relying on quote unquote the public to monitor and to be the content moderation factor. I don't think that's working.
Yeah. And Andy, we're seeing this happen time and again. I think there have been 7 or 8 mass shootings just this year at schools or school-related facilities, according to the Washington Post. Um, it's happening in cities. It's happening in rural communities. It's happening in schools. It's happening in churches, shopping centers, supermarkets, movie theaters, public parks, streets in an urban community. You name it. It happens everywhere.
Right.
And
Nobody's
you're now
safe.
a part of this community that just keeps growing every day. I just wonder what's it like for you and for families who are in the same position that you're in.
Well, it never gets easier.
Mm.
There's always going to be, this void. There is a sculpture in Geneva, Switzerland, I believe, and it's called Melancholy, and it depicts this figure that his head is slumped over, his arms are crossed, he's sitting, and where his torso is, there's this giant hole. And
Mm.
that's the reason it's called melancholy, because that's kind of how we all get through life. Yeah, we're going to have days where we laugh and we enjoy life as best we can, but there's a hole there that's never going to go away. And so the only thing you can do, what I try to do is, everybody reacts differently to something like what happened to me. Uh, I know Adam Ward's family. They're great people, but they're very private, and they did not go the route that I did. I
Mm.
felt like my purpose in life was to try and make the effort to change this horrible dynamic that's going on. And I've been joined by a lot of other folks in my, as I say, I call it the club that no one wants to join. And
Yeah.
as you mentioned, sadly, that club is growing. It grows every day, and
Yeah.
it's just bullshit. We've got to do something about it, but the only way it's going to change is for people to get out and vote and go, we've had enough of this shit. We need somebody that can go in there and have the balls to change it.
That's right. And it's not about taking guns away from people or eliminating the Second Amendment. These are all red herrings, and people should finally get over these ridiculous talking points that come out of the NRA, that come out of the MAGA base, and so on. Nobody wants to do that. We're talking about common sense gun control legislation, gun safety legislation, universal background checks. I mean, that sort of a thing. I mean, we had an assault weapons ban in the 90s and into the 2000s. That made a dent if you look at the studies and the statistics. And I just don't know why we can't have those kinds of regulations in this country. We're unique among all of these industrialized developed nations with this plague that we have here, Andy. And the one thing I do want to say though is Allison went to my alma mater, James Madison University in Virginia. You're a proud Virginian. I'm a proud Virginian. And I will say that Allison's memory lives on for folks who don't know this. The people at JMU in Harrisonburg, Virginia, they still talk about Allison to this day. There are portions of the communications department there that are dedicated to Allison. And so Andy, her memory lives on. I do think that's a beautiful thing. She wanted to be a reporter. She was a great reporter, would have had a fantastic career as a journalist. But just your thoughts on her memory and legacy, it still shines bright there in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia.
Yeah, and every place else. And I'll have to send you the piece that Joe DeShield, one of her coworkers at WDBJ, did, and it was remarkable. I don't know that you could have done it any better than he did, but that is that sort of that really it captures what she was all about. I mean, she
Yeah.
was a spark. She was revered uh, at JMU. I mean, she was, because you're one of those guys. You're one of these people that who you are in person, who you are on camera, the people that see you on TV. You're that guy. You're that guy in person. And that was Allison. I mean, she was kind, she was generous. One of the things, or one of her former colleagues at DBJ told me recently. He said, we'd come into the pitch meetings, and he said I was lazy. I had like nothing. I had nothing to pitch. She would have 5 stories, and she would give me one. She would give me one of the stories. I mean, but that's the kind of person she was. She was generous. She was always trying to mentor people and make people better. And that's why, 10 years later, she's still beloved by, the people at JMU. And I can't tell you the number of times that, strangers that will come up to me and say, I never met her, but I feel like I know her. And I think that's the kind of legacy and the mark that she leaves on the world. And it'll just keep going. As long as I'm alive, I'm going to make sure that she's always remembered.
Well, I'll continue to do that too, Andy. And I always enjoy our conversations. And when you shoot me a little text here and there and say, Jim, what about this story? What about that story? Believe me, I take them to heart, and I rack my brains. And how can we do this? But I'm so glad we finally connected on the show, and I hope we can have you back as often as possible. But I think about Allison from time to time, and she's a part of this JMU community, and I really just and you and your wife just think the world of both of you.
Well, I appreciate it, and likewise. And the next time we do this, hopefully it'll be a lighter subject, perhaps. But I'm always glad to talk about Allison because of who she was and what she means to all of us.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Andy. Really appreciate the time. Let's do this again soon, and we'll stay in touch. Thank you.
All right, buddy. Good to see you.
Andy Parker, thank you so much.
Take care.
And that, folks, sometimes I wrap these things up with a long soliloquy, but, I'll just say this: the world needs more Allison Parkers. Um, the profession of television journalism needs more Allison Parkers. You just heard her dad right there say she would come into planning meetings with 5 stories, and if a fellow reporter didn't have one, she would hand one out. That's the kind of person that she was, and she's the kind of person we need in this world. But we don't have her in this world because we insist on ignoring and not having the guts and the courage to solve this problem. Why can't we solve this problem? It's because of a lack of political courage. And all it's going to take is a couple of votes to pass meaningful gun safety legislation, things like background checks, things like the assault weapons ban, and so on. And I know folks at home might say, gosh, Jim, you're supposed to be a journalist. Why are you taking these positions on things? Because enough is enough. This has been going on since the late 1990s. My goodness. And the people on the far right will think of anything to blame this plague on. They'll talk about trans issues and so on. Baloney. It's whether you care about kids more than guns. That's the bottom line. Whether you care about people like Allison or the guns. That's the bottom line. And so my heart goes out to people like Andy Parker. And, on this show, I will continue to highlight families like the Parkers, because this is not an issue where we stick our head in the sand, folks. It's something we take head on. All right. Thanks very much for joining us. See you next time.